Hello, welcome to the Yoga Lawyer Show. Today we're going to be talking about the travel ban
3.0.
3.0 because it is the third version of the travel ban. They've gone back, the president has gone back with his advisors 3 times, and this is the latest version that the Supreme Court just heard oral arguments on. Was it a week ago? Was it a little over a week ago?
It was earlier this week.
Earlier this week. Man, time flies because it feels like it was longer ago.
Time is a construct.
So we thought we'd talk about that because that's a lawyerly thing to discuss, and we just listened to the entire oral arguments. They had 30 minutes each side, and we thought we'd present some information on that. So, background, Katie mentioned, it's the third version. So, the first version was pretty quickly shut down, and I think the president went back realizing there was a lot of problems with it, and
it was pretty quickly put out there. So didn't it?
It's like 7 days after he was in office.
It was like one of the first things that he did. It was an executive order, and it was shut down pretty quickly because it just. It was a little excessive.
It was clearly banning, Muslims, and it's interesting though now that I think about it, because according to the arguments of his side, that one probably, the arguments they were making would say that even that travel ban probably would have held up. The oral arguments that his side was presenting, that the president basically has this very broad authority to enact whatever kind of immigration policies he wants. But I think they were trying to be more intelligent about it, so they went back and made it more palatable.
Yeah, he called it more politically correct. Watered down and politically correct.
And he seemed upset about it. This was on Twitter.
Yeah, which is what I mentioned earlier. Like, why do people get upset about political correctness?
Yes.
Why does that bother them? Because I personally believe it takes zero effort to be nice to someone. So, being politically correct, why would that offend you when someone asks you to just be nice? Why does that offend you? I don't get it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So if being politically correct is just sort of a way to be polite and nice to each other, then what is the problem with it?
Why does that upset you?
That's a good question. But so now we're in the third version of the travel ban. It bans people from 5 predominantly Muslim countries. I think they have 90-something% Muslims, which is Iran, Libya, Syria, and Yemen. And then it also bans, so those are the 4 predominantly Muslim, and then also Somalia, which I think that one was more like 55% Muslim. I might be getting my numbers a little wrong. And then they also banned people from 2 other non-predominantly Muslim countries, Venezuela and North Korea.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and they don't actually mention those. They say that the president has the authority to ban certain individuals from those 2 places. From North Korea, I think it's a broader ban than in Venezuela. Venezuela, he's just banning certain government officials.
Okay, so what she's saying is the respondents in this case, because this is the state of Hawaii that is the respondents in this lawsuit. So the state of Hawaii isn't appealing, for lack of a better way to say it, the president's ban on the non-Muslim countries, just the Muslim countries. And I think those 2 countries were added to try to make the ban more palatable. They weren't in the first 2 iterations. So,
no.
But that doesn't.
They were politically correct.
They were politically correct. So that was the change. Now this is interesting. I want to kind of throw this in here. It's sort of a little bit of a sidebar, but that I've heard a lot of people say when this ban was first enacted. Friends on Facebook were saying, "What is wrong? Why are people so upset about this travel ban? We were attacked by terrorists on 9/11." They were Muslim, so why is it wrong to ban people from Muslim countries? But it's sort of funny when you think about it, because the terrorists that attacked the United States on 9/11 and the terrorist attacks that have happened in the country outside of 9/11 have mostly been from countries that were not on this list. Saudi Arabia is the number 1 country that has attacked the United States, that's a Muslim country, and that has resulted in the most deaths. I've got a chart here, we can post it in the description. But from Saudi Arabia, there's been over 2,300 murders of U.S. citizens. They're not banned. Number 2 is United Arab Emirates. 314 murders of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. They're not banned. Number 3 is Egypt, followed by Lebanon. Both have about 160 each. None of those countries are banned. The 5 countries that are banned, 0 deaths on American soil. 0 terrorist deaths on American soil, and a total of 17 actual terrorist attempts. 17.
Or accusations of terrorist attempts.
So the ban doesn't do what people think it does when they try to support it. And they say, the ban, but it's going to keep us safe from terrorists. That's not exactly what it's doing, because if that's what we were trying to do, then why not ban Saudi Arabia? Why not ban United Arab Emirates, etc.?
So why not ban Saudi Arabia?
That's a good question. I know that there's a lot of money interests involved in Saudi Arabia. And I'm not saying they should ban Saudi Arabia, because I don't think that's right either. I don't think we should ban really any country in particular. I think it needs to be more on an individual basis, which is where we get now back into the arguments. So the basic argument from Hawaii is that Congress is who has the authority to set up the vetting procedures, and the vetting procedures are already very strict.
Very extensive, and they have
you have to go through all kinds of interviews and provide innumerable types of proof that you have good intentions for coming to the U.S.
Interestingly, the 3 criteria that they use to evaluate these countries to determine which countries should be on the list of the banned countries were the same criteria that a congressional program, the visa waiver system, they use the same criteria for deciding if the person that's applying for the visa waiver should get it. So again, they're using a congressional statute, essentially. They're using Congress has the power.
And that's really where the arguments, come down. President Trump's argument versus I keep saying city of Hawaii. It's a state. The government of Hawaii, their argument are that, Trump's side is saying that the executive branch, President Trump, has broad authority to make laws regarding the immigration into this country, and Hawaii is saying that is a power that Congress has, and that Congress is using, and there's no point for the president to do this, and that essentially it's creating this overbroad, overreaching power that could lead to a slippery slope.
Legislation. That was the word I couldn't think of.
Legislation.
Sorry.
And we listen to the arguments, and it's interesting. It's going to be really hard to predict what the Supreme Court does. The best argument, I thought, from President Trump's team was that the Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction to hear this. And actually, Katie can even she's such a Supreme Court junkie that knows more about how it works. But she was explaining to me it's not that the Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction, but whether the Ninth Circuit that heard the case originally, and now the Supreme Court is hearing that the Ninth Circuit's, or they're reviewing the Ninth Circuit's decision, whether they had jurisdiction. And they have some strong arguments that perhaps this isn't an issue for the courts to decide. And I have a feeling that if the court were to decline to issue an opinion or to, reverse the travel ban, it might be for that reason. But we also heard some interesting arguments regarding President Trump's intention when he created the travel ban. And in the briefs that we reviewed, there's just lists and lists of tweets and statements that President Trump, or then candidate Trump, said.
And that the White House administration said. So beyond just the person, his administration were also supporting these statements.
That basically this is a Muslim ban. Now,
they were discriminatory statements, and it was connecting it to the ban, like the legislation of the ban.
Because now they're trying to say this isn't a Muslim ban, it's more about, just trying to keep the governments that don't respect our vetting process, we should not allow their citizens into the country.
So their argument is that these governments aren't complying with what we're asking them to provide. They're not giving us documents suggesting that certain individuals could be terrorists. They're not explaining all of that, and that's the reason why they're being banned.
Not because they're Muslim, but there's a ton of peripheral evidence that suggests that's exactly what it is. And there was an interesting question. Was it Sotomayor that asked the question about, or was it Kagan, about whether all of the countries that aren't following our tests are they excluded? Because there's 3 tests, and
that was a really good
and
question.
The answer is no. So it's not like
but he skirted that question.
The attorney that was performing the oral argument didn't answer the question directly, but clearly the answer was no. That it's not that every country that doesn't follow these procedures it's banned. It's just these 5. Or these 7 if you include North Korea and Venezuela. So that again raises the question of intent. What is the intent here? And President Trump's legal team couldn't say that the intent wasn't a travel ban. They didn't really directly address that because they say they don't have to. They don't
Yeah.
have to. His intent doesn't matter. His intent as a candidate in particular doesn't matter.
Yeah, so when he was candidate Trump, before he was President Trump, he made a lot of inflammatory and denigrating statements about how he wanted to keep Muslims out of America and stop them from coming in. And then it's funny that 7 days into his presidency, he comes out with this travel ban. And if he had stopped the statements there, if he hadn't continued, but after the ban, he insinuated that it was about Muslims and specifically because of their religion, and mentioned his campaign and all of the things that he was saying when he was on the campaign trail. So it does kind of make you think that it was discriminatory. They're arguing that it doesn't matter regardless.
Yeah, that he basically has the authority to do it, whether it's discriminatory or not. But they also argue in the alternative that the things that he said when he was a candidate don't apply. And now the Hawaii, they argued that, it does apply when he comes back now that he is President Trump, and basically reiterates it, like he came out after the ban and said, now I'm following through on all my campaign promises. And he also tweeted several anti-Muslim tweets or memes around the same time too. So even as president, he's done things to suggest that it is a ban on Muslims. And yeah, there was something else that I can't think of what it was.
His press secretary backed it up too. So the administration,
That's what it was.
The administration supported his positions. They didn't try to separate themselves from the discriminatory insinuations that he was making through tweets or statements. I mean, I don't think that after he was president, he outright said that we're banning Muslims, but he insinuated and pointed back to his statements during the campaign. So it's really hard to make an argument that he wasn't basing this travel ban off of some discriminatory statements, or that there was some reason for, besides the government's interest in national security, which is a government interest.
Yeah, they have a clear interest in protecting national security,
which is one of their arguments, and that's fine. We totally understand that the government does have a compelling interest in protecting in national security, but I don't know, if it comes in conflict with discrimination, there are arguments against it.
Well, I mean, here the thing is I mean, they're basically, because they're going to have a hard time arguing that President Trump hasn't said racist or denigrating things about Muslims.
I don't think you can argue that.
So they're not arguing that. They're essentially arguing that the court really doesn't have jurisdiction to decide this, and that his intention doesn't matter. That because of the national security interest, it doesn't matter that he's said that or intended that in the past.
Hawaii makes an argument for the Establishment Clause, which basically says that there can be no established religion within the United States, which means essentially that they can't ban your religion, which is kind of what he's trying to do. He's trying to ban the Muslim religion from at least from penetrating the U.S. more. So the Establishment Clause would not allow him to do that, but they're arguing that the Establishment Clause doesn't apply because the Constitution doesn't apply to people that aren't American citizens.
And they're not here yet. Because, I mean, I think the Constitution would apply if you're not an American citizen, but you're on American soil to some extent. I mean, there's case law that says it does. But they're saying they're not even in the country yet. This is like in the air. We're talking about the Establishment Clause because these people haven't come in yet. They've been banned from coming in. So how can they be protected by the Constitution when they're not even here?
And Hawaii's arguing that it does affect the citizens, I guess maybe emotionally.
That are here. Yeah, I mean, they do make those arguments. And there
were some certain situations, some cases where there were I guess plaintiffs, you would kind of call them, people that were directly affected by the ban. They mentioned a 10-year-old girl who needed some medical treatment that was affected by the ban.
And she wasn't allowed in under the ban. And there were many scholars and
students.
Doctors, students, that haven't been allowed in specifically under the ban.
Which kind of gets to the core of the problem of the ban. The ban is fine if it were more particularized, if it was on a case-by-case basis, if it didn't ban whole countries. And then you wouldn't even need the ban because we have a vetting process. Yeah,
Congress
that's very extensive.
Done that already.
So that's kind of the point I think we're trying to make.
Well, and also that this would have done nothing to stop any of the terror attacks that have actually happened in the U.S. The biggest being 9/11. This ban would have done nothing because none of the countries that were involved in 9/11 are banned. So it's kind of like, what are we doing? I mean, honestly, it looks like that this is just a way of kind of doing something. Like candidate Trump promised he was going to do a Muslim ban. He comes in 7 days after coming into office. He enacts the first version of this ban, and he says, job done. Like, he even said something like that, tweeted something like, I've done what I set out to do. So it's a way of looking like he's doing something and getting his base happy, like, yeah, we're banning people that we should be banning. Let's not be politically correct. But in reality, it's doing nothing to make us safer, and it's hurting people that genuinely should be in this country.
Right. So I think the thing that we're getting at is, regardless of the arguments, the ban is unnecessary. We already have the vetting process. The president doesn't need to do this. It's not effective. So this shouldn't even be a problem. This shouldn't be a thing.
At the same time, I don't know that the court's going to agree, because legally, President Trump's team has raised some arguments jurisdictionally and then also just regarding the executive power that the court might just agree with him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, we won't know until maybe June, so the court's term ends in June, late June, so that's probably the earliest that we'll hear. They might wait until the next term.
When is that?
Which I think is in October, is when they start up again. They get a recess, the Supreme Court does.
Summer break.
Yeah, they they get a lot of cases. The Supreme Court gets a lot of cases, and they hear a lot of cases. We only hear about the big ones that get like a whole crowd of people. There were a bunch of people.
Yeah, in the gallery, and that you could hear people laughing. And just.
I mean, it's good that the Supreme Court, the justices were asking a lot of questions, which is good. It means that they haven't made their decision yet. Usually, they go in, they get to read all of the amicus briefs, they get to read the initial briefs. They go in knowing everything that these people are going to argue. So, oral argument at the Supreme Court level is generally just the justices asking questions, and if they don't ask a lot of questions, they've probably already decided.
Made up their mind.
But since they asked a lot of questions during this oral argument, and they even extended the time, they gave them an extra 5 minutes, that suggests that maybe they haven't completely decided yet.
Well, and it was a lot of times, when you're watching oral argument, you can get a feel for where they're going based on the questions, and that was really hard here, because they really kind of asked a lot of questions of both sides, and a lot of questions, about their arguments and uprooting their arguments, so to speak, on both sides. So it would be very hard to predict what they're going to do here.
I think the one thing we can say that we noticed, or at least I noticed, is that the liberal justices saw the merits in an establishment clause argument, but weren't sure if it was really applicable, and that generally the court felt like the president had the power to do these executive orders. It was just the intent that was in question.
Yeah, whether the intent and whether it matters, the intention matters, which I would hope that it does. I'm not sure.
I would too. I hope that, I understand coming from him being a private citizen, statements of a private citizen shouldn't matter as much as statements of a president. But when those statements then translate after you're nominated and you become the president,
and you revert back, like he,
yes,
relates back to him, like saying, "This is me fulfilling my campaign promises I made last week."
If you're not,
if he didn't say that, it would be different.
Because I understand that then he didn't have a cabinet, he didn't have these higher level advisors. But when you're president, and you're not saying like, "Oh yeah, I said those things on the campaign trail," kind of what you do to get elected. You say what they want to hear, but maybe I was wrong in how I was saying them. Then maybe I don't know. It just. Intention should matter, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how that falls under the laws that are applicable here. I mean, it seems in general intention matters. I mean, in any kind of criminal proceeding, intention matters, and in most civil proceedings, there's some type of intent that's involved a lot of the time on these type of issues. But it seemed like there were some strong arguments from President Trump's side that maybe intention doesn't come into play, and if it doesn't, then I think the arguments of Hawaii probably do fail if the intention doesn't matter, because that's the key. This is intention, really.
It'll be interesting if the court decides that they don't have the jurisdiction to solve this question or to answer it.
All right, we have anything else on it?
I don't think so. We should do a series on the Supreme Court.
Maybe we could do. Katie loves the Supreme Court so much.
It's my favorite.
I definitely want to follow up on this once we get the opinion.
Yeah, hopefully we get it. Sometimes they'll extend it.
Because if it's not till October, it'll be after you're already gone to law
I'm
school.
going to law school.
You'll be studying this in law school.
Hopefully.
But we'd love to hear feedback. We did express some opinions here on the video. You can always comment, let us know that you disagree with us or agree. I like the disagreeing ones better, I
Me
have
too.
to say. I mean, it's great to agree too. Be like, yeah, we agree. But when you disagree and you can do it in a way that's not disagreeable, I mean, even if you're mean, I don't care. I usually ignore the mean stuff and just try to get to the heart of what you're saying. But we love to have discourse and talk to people that
Yeah.
Thank you for watching the Yoga Lawyer video.